Water Gypsy, a short story. I've lost my great-great-grandmother. Not for the first time, mind you. It's not that kind of losing where you go around with your eyelids swollen and your nose looks like a Belisha beacon and everything's shushed in the kitchen between the endless cuppers with 2 sugars and the vicar dropping by to see what makes her tick because she wasn't a regular and such. I mean the family tree kind of lost. Careless really, I suppose. I had her nailed down on the 1861 census, give or take a misspelling or 2. She was staying on a little farm cottage in the next village with her baby son Samuel, aged 5 months. Last time he ever got called Samuel, even barring Sundays. The census enumerator would have tickled little Samuel under the chin while his mum counted up on her fingers. His old grandad got put down as head of the household, even though he couldn't quite hear the questions and couldn't remember which county he was born in after they changed the boundaries. And weren't these census clerk laddies getting younger and younger every year? And didn't they all seem to drop their voices and their H's these days? This is my great-great-great-great-granddad. That's what's confusing. He was her grandad, not the wee bairn's grandad at all. They meant great-grandfather to him. But the enumerator wasn't from the village, so he wasn't to know, was he? He'd still got all the houses in the street, not to mention all the boats moored along the canal, to do by nightfall. I was looking up the births, marriages and deaths in the library for months after that. I wanted to know if great-great-grandma had married or died. Not to be morbid or anything, just to know and to have a kind of full stop, tin hat on it. But nothing. Somebody else, no relation, only a neighbour from the next cottage along, was witness to the old man's death 6 months later, just before harvest time. Great-great-grandma, 7th generation water gypsy, child of the canal, must have been elsewhere, I reckon. Somewhere off the Lings levels, maybe on the bankside when the boat moored for the night. That's my version anyway. Funny to think of your great-great-grandma breastfeeding. With all those greats, you tend to think of them as all wrinklies. Not the breasts, I mean, the ancestors. I suppose my grandson thinks of me as a wrinkly, come to that. Parish records are even better. The smell of wormwoody oak and damp kneelers with the snowdrop garlands wilting on the pew ends from the January wedding to get it in before Plough Monday, when the bridesmaid caught a fever and could have saved herself the bother of walking home again. She might as well have sat on the creaky bench under the lich gate and waited for the pony and trap to come with her coffin in the parish beer. I go into all those kinds of details, silly really, but it makes them live again. Well, for me it does. Makes them seem like honest-to-goodness flesh and blood rather than just all those dull as ditchwater dates and serial numbers. I just haven't had the old serendipity with Nancy. The certificates and records that name her at all call her Anna or Anne, but round here, around then, she would have been plain Nancy, I reckon. That makes her live a bit for me, right out of the box. But after 1861, I'm having no blinking luck at all. Nancy's another one of these that plays hide and seek with you. The harder I search, the less she seems to want to be found. Baby Sam turns up annoyingly, bless his Victorian socks, all on his lonesome on the next census. No great-grand anything, no breastfeeding. Well, there wouldn't be, would there? Same village, different farm. Now a cheeky 10-year-old. Well, the census doesn't actually say he was cheeky, but they can be, can't they, at that age? He's slumped on the settle, glaring at the kitchen floor, kicking the leg of the table, with the farmer's sons teasing him and ruffling his hair, when the man with the pen and the form with all the tick boxes goes, Shall we just put farm servant, sir? The farmer's boys all go up in 2-year intervals. More like 18-month intervals, I'd guess, because they only had douches or lamb's intestines as thick as a bicycle inner tube for birth control in those days, didn't they? Anyway, little lad Sam's the same age on that census as one of the farmer's sons, Edward. But he's not his twin, not with those different surnames and his eyes that give nothing away. "Leave him and pack it in, Neddy," says the farmer. "Pipe down while this gentleman writes us all down on his fancy docket." Not that the census is fancy, not that the farmer really said that, only in my head, mind. They nearly called my own grandson Edward. Not that you'd dare call him Neddy for short these days. He'd be all, "Oh, Nan, that's so uncool, that is so yesterday." I'm well last century to that little scamp. Our Jamie talks like that all the time, like those Australian soaps with the uppy-endy twangy intonation and everything. I read in my woman's magazine that it's called HRT, High Rising Terminal. I read it at the bottom of the page before I realised it wasn't an article about hormone replacement. Jamie's been staying with me this week, so my fridge is jam-packed with drink cartons and cheese disguised in red plastic and other lunchbox-shaped goodies. All my healthy greens have been squeezed over to the sidelines by pre-packaged reds and oranges and monster purples with cartoons on. Bless him. He's been flicking through my ancestry files before bedtime. Nearly more interested in them than in his comics and his play-all-day games console thingamy with the high-definition graphics and the built-in hedgehog. Jamie looks at the sepia photos and asks who everybody is. He even remembers to put his drinks carton down on the very furthest side of the table to prevent sticky spills, even though it means he has to keep reaching over to get it. He wants to know everything, and you can see him making up the gaps like I do, memorising the names and trying to read the badges on Uncle Fred's uniform. I tell him about his 3 times great-granddad Sam, who looks back at us from a transparency with crinkly corners taken in 1897. "This one wants to go going over with the salt and pepper filter on a photo fixer," says Jamie. "Does it?" I say. Sharp as mustard, our Jamie. I'm still a bit non-PC, you see. I remind him, and we giggle at how we all have red eyes on the latest family group snap. "I'm getting a digital camera for my next birthday, Nan," he tells me. He has another look at great-granddad's photo, the one with the farmer's smock and the gaiters, the moustache, and that gaze I always imagine is defiance, weighing us up from the side of the threshing machine. "Is he the one with no father and you've lost his mam?" Jamie asks, eyeballing grown-up Sam. "Why don't we go and find her, Nan?" "The library'll be shutting in half an hour," I tell him, but he jumps up. "Let's go down the graveyard." I think about saying I need to get the tea on and go down to the shop, but it's sandwiches, and anyway, my heart's suddenly beating faster than when I found out my dad's Uncle Cyril was a serial bigamist and made up his middle name. Uncle Cyril didn't actually adopt that preposterous extra moniker just to throw me off his trail, but to keep the long arm of the law off his back, the handcuffs off his wrist, and the arrows off his jacket. "Let's go," I say. Jamie runs his hand along the churchyard wall, letting it bounce over the knobbly curls and curves, where the stonemasons had a bit of a Sistine Chapel moment, only in stone, of course. As we walk through the main gate, along where the horse-chestnut trees plot out the edges of the pathways, so light aircraft can look down and play imaginary noughts and crosses as they fly to the local airfield, it's late afternoon. The mist's creeping along the canal and the willows drizzle ribbony shadows, as if they're green ghosts rinsing their hair in the water. That's what Jamie says as we move up and down the rows of gravestones. He's trying to scare himself, I think. It used to be the swivel-eyed phantom hiding inside the outside loo for me and my sisters, but kids today still like a bit of a blood curdle when they're bored of being grown up and sophisticated, don't they? We stoop over some of the tombstones that have ended up horizontal. mossy clumps hiding half the letters, and cracks where tree roots are crumbling the chiselled lettering back to elemental faults and fissures. Jamie does most of the stooping, while I tell him what I can remember from my notes, which is mostly the bits in between the facts. It's fun for a while, but we aren't finding anybody we know, and the sun's rapidly sliding, not very helpfully, down the field beyond the waterway, gilding the rivets on the old canal bridge. "Like Tutankhamen," says Jamie, pointing. I don't think we go back that far. We find ourselves at the bridge because it's on the way to the shop, if it's still open. Jamie does his thing, pretending to be the lockkeeper, winding open the invisible lock gates, making the creaking noises not heard for half a century or more, watching the slow rising of the invisible keel of a barge. We lean for a bit on the ancient fence post, where the water level since 1770 recorded as carved notches, rubbed deeper and blackened by centuries of tethered cattle and local fingernails comparing the highs and lows of flood and drought. You couldn't keep your foot in here easily, even if you were trying. We move out, Jamie and I, to the centre of the bridge, hanging our heads over the parapet to watch the water slipping into the evening sunset cellophane squiggles of gold round a bend in the bank. "Look! Look down in the water, Nan! I can see your face!" He has to say it twice. "Nan! Look! Your face is in the water!" We stood for ages, not speaking anymore. You could hear the mallards roosting in the reeds on the village pond, which seemed ever so close through the mist that was turning to gold light, into specks of ash grey and red ripples like the heart of the cup was burning. The water below was rushing, nearly making me giddy, nearly making me ready to give up and give in. "I'm ready for my tea now, what about you?" I think I said. Jamie sighed and gave me one of his hugs that you don't expect. Today I've been putting all the photos ship-shape. They were higgledy-piggledy, any old how. Now at least they're all laid out in the little see-through pockets in chronological order, but the dreamy bits will still come bleeding out between them, telling the secret stories. Great-Grandad Sam in his gaiters and smock in the oldest image I have of his side of the family. One of my married-in aunts was frighteningly efficient at clearing the decks, as she called it. "Nobody knows any of these old reprobates now," she used to cackle, fluent in family cliché. "Let sleeping dogs lie, let the dead bury their dead." It was always the same in our family. People wore their labels as if it was part of their name. You asked no more, and you were told no lies but the ones you told yourself, seen and not heard. "Nan, look! Your face is in the water." I look again at Sam's birth certificate. The address is an obscure alleyway in a distant port where the waterway through these villages runs out, and the ocean rings like a bell's swallowed boom. That terrace was one of the first of those back-to-back slum courtyards to be cleared under the Edwardian sanitary reforms that swept away night soil and lingering eyesores. I look at the line drawn diagonally through the section where the father's name is meant to be. There is nothing more, just a cross marking where Nancy, Nance or Nan, registered her baby as the neighbours tuttered and the family hid their eyes and kept their counsel. I've lost my great-great-grandmother. It feels different this time. I want them to be gentle with her as they carry up the sodden corpse to the Dove and Anchor. I want them to know about her, to care as I care, to intuit what Jamie knew that weekend he came to stay. I want them to remember what she's been through so bravely, so lonely, till that moment on the bridge's parapet. I want the sexton with the thin face and the hacking cough to mumble something more than "out of her misery" and "may God have mercy," while he wipes the unconsecrated earth from under his consecrated fingernails, standing shivering in the moonlight by the crossroads. tomorrow I'll drop her a rose in the canal. I'll ask Jamie how I can get on email too.